Welcome back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we're talking about the heat. We're talking about the heat today. It has been hot, and we're going through it. It feels like summer came early, right?
Yeah, I think the official first day is like
The 21st.
21st, summer solstice, but
Yeah, Dan knows. It's like it's his day,
That's
right?
my beach day.
yeah.
That's my beach day.
Yeah.
And it got here just a little bit ahead, and it went from like, I think the biggest thing is not super hot, but it was the transition. It went from like 50-degree nights to like it's warm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like a week ago, the highs were in the 70s.
Yeah,
And I think yesterday, what did we hit? Like 97?
Yeah.
Does that sound right? Something like that?
It was a little hot.
Yeah. So that's a big swing. And it definitely like has an impact on health, the way our guys work, being outside, and kind of got us thinking about like enduring, right? And like sort of the extremes of our job and its nature.
we live in the Northeast. We have all the seasons, the benefit to them and the downside of them. But that is the difference of, I think about, how challenging it is, but how our business has, not our business, but the construction, open ROPS, cabs in the back in the day with no air conditioning, to not even having ROPS and like just being out beating the sun and all those kind of things, and like how it's gotten better for the people that are in the field, but it's still like, what I guess it really boils down to is trying to figure out, is it better or worse? Because I grew up without air conditioning, and the heat didn't bother me because I was always in it. And now the house is always at a set temperature within a couple degrees. The vehicles, like, it's funny, I remember being a kid and you drive around, everybody had their windows down, arms out, getting the air flowing through the car. And now, like, you drive down the road and there's nobody with it. If someone has their window open, it's like, well, because usually on their phone or something else making a phone call. But that change is so much more of a taxing. Because I remember playing baseball like junior high, and the one kid, like, baseball for me in the afternoon meant I didn't work. So I was excited about it. But there was literally kids on my teams that, had air conditioning in those days. And like, they'd come and just sit on the bench because it was too, like, you know what I mean? Like, they just didn't have that ability to handle the tolerance.
Yeah, the tolerance to it. Yeah, for sure. It's, I know, the car thing always gets me with the windows, because given my choice, I'd rather be in something with the windows down, roof off, or motorcycle, something. But we've become so accustomed to conducting, whether it be business or personal, that you're always on the phone talking. You just use it as more time that you have to get things done or have conversations. But you can't do that with the windows down. So you just end up, in a constant state of air conditioning. And what really makes it odd for me is our place down the shore. We've talked about it. Aaron's family's had it for generations, and it's built for not air. Now, we did add air to it, but Erin is really hesitant to turn it on until it's not on yet. She may turn it on this week with it being this hot, but the house was built to stay cool. It's a little bit different, and Ford knows Ford's been there. It's a little bit different because they built condos on both sides, so they cut down some of our airflow, but it's built to shed that heat. And as soon as she turns the air on, it's on. Like, once we make that decision and the commitment, the girls are going to get used to the air again, and they're going to want to have it on.
Yeah.
And you want to be inside.
And
like,
they won't want to be inside.
Well, but I mean, we came home, we were on vacation the other week, and we came home and it was a beautiful day out, but like, well, putting sunscreen on kids is a whole party of a different stage. But
you got to get the long sleeve.
Yeah. You want to go out fully, like, you look like you are scared of the sun. But like the temperature, like the comfort, the comfort. Expectation of comfort is so high. And so, it makes it even more challenging for people.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. And we talk about things in terms of sports often. Yeah. And I always think about like heat acclimation, right? That's big in football. So generally speaking, you've got that first week of full exercise, but no pads, no extra burden weight. And there is something to becoming acclimated to the conditions. And when you have these big changes, I think it does catch people off guard, right? They may not be adequately hydrated, or maybe they're just not used to bringing as much water to work or things like that. And that's probably where it's the most dangerous. Like middle of the summer, end of summer, we've been doing it for weeks. People are ready for it. People expect it. They are prepared for it. But big changes quickly, really in any kind of extreme weather. But the heat seems to impact us more than others.
Well, I think the other thing is a very interesting, going back to my age issue, but when we were kids, there was like 3 things to drink, right? I mean, there was milk, there was water, and there were sodas. Like, and we're even talking at like the Turkey Hill back in the day or the convenience store. There wasn't all these plethora of drinks that just because it's a liquid, it might not actually be hydrating to you.
Sure, yeah.
You know, especially a lot of the energy stuff that like gives you a boost, but what else it does to you. Whereas like back in the day, it was just, I mean, I remember when Gatorade like became popular, it was just popular with like, you know, like that was like the first thing that was actually designed to help with electrolytes and stuff. But before that, there was none of this stuff. Like, you know, I laugh, our little kids are walking around with water bottles and I'm like, my parents are just like, what is going on with these water bottles? Like nobody did that. Like, there was no such thing back in the day, like personal water bottles, like track. Like I go to leave some places, like okay, go collect all the water bottles, and it's like that was never a thing. No, like I don't understand how that. I don't know how we survived without it, or like you know, it's just a difference of how things are going now.
It's just hard because I hate to say that we've gotten soft, but I think it is the reality of the situation. You know, you look at it like when we were talking yesterday or the day before, and you were talking about heat acclimation.
Sure.
And I didn't laugh when you said it, but internally I laughed because I was like heat acclimation for me when I started to play football in high school was you showed up for 3-a-days.
Yep.
And there was no wait. The only wait for pads was there was some governmental requirement that you had 2 practices. So the 3rd practice you were in pads. That's day 1.
Okay.
It's August. It's hot.
I think it's 5 days now. But
and like if you know, if you passed out, it apparently you didn't train hard enough over the summer. Like I remember the coach saying, like he was trying to make people pass out. Like he wanted to see who he's going to be able to run with, who could survive in these conditions. It was, you know, I mean, that's what camp was for that first week. It was brutal. It was they were trying to break everybody and see who would survive, and you can't do that now. But additionally.
Legally.
Additionally, we've gotten softer because of it. You know, in the water bottle thing, like Brian and I have talked about this. I'll still drink out of a hose. Yeah. Like I don't care.
Sure.
My girls think I'm like a
barbarian.
I'm like a barbarian.
I'm working out in the yard. Like,
what are you doing drinking out of a hose? Like you realize it's the same water that came out of the faucet.
Well,
now they put it through a filter afterwards, and
they're going to drink out of a plastic bottle.
And they're going to put it. Well, no, they're going to have. They have their stainless steel, surgical grade stainless steel, Brian. You can't have plastic out in the sun; it would release BPA's or something. There's all kinds of issues.
Jeez.
But you know, going back, like I remember there was like the water horse thing is what we drank at. Like, you know, if you were dying of thirst, you were going to have to run across the entire complex to get to this like mushy area of the field where water just ran out of PVC that you could still see the purple pipe glue,
the glue
on that they would make. You know, and then you'd like drink as much water as you could, get soaked, and then we'd put our fingers in the holes of the helmet. Fill up the helmet and then put the helmet on just to like drench yourself in cold water and then run back. And the reality is I feel like we all turned out okay, you know?
Sure.
But having said that, the culture has changed in a way that now you make a great point with the energy drinks and everything else. Like when I saw the guys earlier this week, I was out at a site and I was like, hey, just remember, I know we've talked about it. I know it was on the safety call, but hydrated does not mean drink 3 Monsters. Like that's not hydrating. Yeah. I don't know if you're better or worse for it, but drink water. Like if you want to drink Gatorade or Powerade or Body Armor or any of these things, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you have to stay hydrated enough, you know, and I was out with Tom and Colt yesterday and Tom was talking to Colt. Colt was actually making fun of Tom a little bit. And he was like, yeah, I must have acclimated to the heat because I stopped sweating. And Tom was like, no, that means you're dehydrated. And he was like, oh, well, and then Colt said something else ridiculous that also meant he was dehydrated. And Tom was like, no, that means you're really dehydrated. And Colt was like, I'm just messing with you. Like I realized that I'm still sweating. We're just in the shade. It's not as hot right now. But it's one of those things like people don't even realize that, it was a conversation we had with the girls down the shore because of heat and we won't turn that air on yet, because they're outside so much. And we sort of went over those same things with my girls to say like, hey, you want to be sweating, you want to have to go to the bathroom. All these are signs that you're hydrated. And if you're not hydrated, your body, it hurts your body.
Right.
So make sure you drink a lot of water and we don't let them have anything else during the day specifically because of that. Cause we're trying to like train them of how you hydrate yourself.
Yeah. And maybe I'm like, well, we're the same age. You're a couple years older.
Yeah, I'm old.
A couple years. Only a couple years. You got a little milestone coming up.
Yeah.
We're not talking about it.
I'm still moving.
Okay. All right. Good. I think some of it is softer, but I do think some of it's smarter too. I mean, I do think that we are a more informed consumer in many ways than we've ever been. And I think like you talk about like having the water bottles with you are available. And it's a pain because I coach 3 nights a week and I'm yelling at these kids because I'm like, look, I'm gonna run you for 2 hours a night in the heat. And then I need you to show up this weekend and be able to run for 4 hours, right? And then do the same thing the next day. And so I'm like, I know what we're doing. We're depleting your hydration levels. We're depleting your glycogen levels. We're putting you in a spot where you're not fit to perform, and I'm going to ask you to perform. So you got to do your part. And then every night after practice, I'm like yelling at them as they walk away. I'm like, there's 7 water bottles laying on the ground here. Like, I know you brought it. And you're walking away without it. So come pick up your stuff. But I do think some of it is smarter. I think some of it is more informed about what our bodies need to perform or to do well. And maybe that's just me being naive. I don't know.
I think it's also interesting because I think people have a lot more head knowledge about those types of things, but I don't know if everybody's in tune with their body as well as they might have been in the past because you had it to be.
Okay.
Right. So you know what you should be doing, but knowing and doing seems to have a larger gap than it might have before. People passing out, which is, really like your body usually is giving off warning signals before you get there.
Yeah.
Right. But people seem to ignore them, or maybe they've masked them by having extra energy or whatever the scenario is that didn't happen in the past. I played soccer, not football, but that first week it was like in middle August and it was just run suicides, do whatever until basically, you were throwing up. And not saying that was the right way of doing it, but it was just a different time. And so I think part of it is, kind of like we talked a couple weeks ago about like, the benefits and being your self advocate. And that's the same type of thing. Like you really have to listen to your body and be smart about how you're doing things. Like that is really the key to this because it is hot, right? And we're sitting in an office having this conversation. So it's a little bit not tongue in cheek, but so sides of our mouth because we are sitting in this office. But, if you're out there and you're shoveling or something like that, like you just got to really think through how you're doing it. This is when, our industry, the extremes, that's the thing we talk about. It's a tough business. It is tough to be out there in this, when maybe somebody else is sitting in a ice cream stand selling ice cream or something like that. It's different. But, it's being smart with how you're doing it is really what makes the difference between being able to go. I mean, there's days I come home and like be weak and you'd sit there, and you're just like, oh, I'm a little lightheaded. Or like one time I was paving and I got like hives on my legs just because the heat, coming up from it. So like there's stuff that your body does react to all of these things, and you just have to really be try and like feel it instead of just ignoring it. And it'll make you, it's better for you in the long run.
Well, and I feel like, I feel the same way that while you may have more knowledge and we may have more understanding, like I think like make it like our people, right? Like a 17-year-old Gary Rambo knew to stay hydrated. Now he didn't necessarily know why. He didn't know like I got to replace this or that, or should I have Gatorade because it has electrolytes? Sure. But he knew that if he was going to work all day, I need to drink water. You know what I mean? Because it was so. I sort of took it that we may be smarter, but I don't know how much common sense we have. You know what I mean? Like some like base level, like we may know more, but we might have lost the base understanding of just. And Ford might be right. It might just be knowing yourself, like knowing, hey, it's hot. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just, but it is an odd conversation because
that might be fair.
We're definitely more knowledgeable and we know better, but do we do better? You know what I mean? Are we actually acting better? And it's one of those things, maybe that the punishing things they did made us that we had to do some of those things better. And certainly I'm not, Gary's older than me. So I'm sure it was worse for me than it was for Gary. But it's just one of those things that it is tricky because I don't understand why we struggle with this specific thing. It is a gray area. Like, why can we just not stay hydrated?
Well, I think the other thing we need, we need to, like, if you can't do it the first time, it doesn't mean you can't do it. You have to build your endurance to it. That is really the key. Like, if it doesn't work out the first time, you don't just walk off.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah.
Okay. Like you slowly.
Get there. Yeah.
Right. So like if we're having this conversation in 2 months in August, most of the people aren't even blinking at 92 or 97, whatever it is, because they've been through it for a period of time. Yeah. It's always, like we said before, the conscious, the changes are what usually always get you the most.
Yeah.
Well, and the people, like it is different for each individual. Like, I mean, the girls and I were running this weekend and they run differently, so like you have to know yourself. Like if you're a person who acclimates really well to heat and you're fine, then you could even make it the sun. Like we keep talking about hydration, right? Like about water, but then there's I'm sure doctors would tell you that none of us should be in the sun without, protection from UV rays and everything else. But there are some of us that have a genetic background that enables us to be able to be in the sun and we don't get all burned and blistered and peel. And there are others of us that they go out in the sun for a short time and you burn and it's nasty and your body hurts, and you got to be aware of yourself. And I think that happens a little bit. But I also think that is a more outward thing, like it and you learn it over time. But the damage that you do to your body or the reduction in your performance based on water is not as obvious. And so we don't realize it as much in that process.
Yeah. I was thinking about something you said a few minutes ago where like we might be more informed, but we're like not necessarily using the information, something along those lines. And do you think, and I would agree with that. And when I think about it, I feel like we know these things, but I almost feel like I'm saying it more because knowledge isn't necessarily being utilized, or we just maybe are waiting for someone to remind us to do it. I don't know. I was trying to think through that because I sort of tend to agree. Like I do feel like every one of these people that we're talking to and about are like, oh yeah, you gotta drink more water. I'm like, but I keep having to say drink more water, or like, hey, it's going to be hot. Make sure you pack more water. And
I
don't know.
What's the repeat yourself 9,000 times so someone gets it, right? But I know personally, well, it's something like that. It used to be like whatever the number is.
But it was 7, but I was like,
I thought it was 10 or something.
Well, but I mean,
9,000.
Like I know for people that have been in this, and I will just speak for myself. When I get an alert on my phone telling me it's hot outside and to drink water, it's annoying because it's like, really, is that where we're at that we have to do this? But like, if it makes one person think of it and take some water, it's a benefit. But it's just, you're like, really, are we at that point where like, we have to handhold people? And that's really what this is dancing around, is that, taking care of yourself, being a self-advocate, making sure that you're doing the right things is what we're trying to talk about, because, there isn't always going to be a higher whatever as far as a parent, a coach, a mentor in your space to remind you these things. So you have to kind of start taking them internally and doing them yourself.
Yeah.
And doing them for, to piggyback on what you're saying and knowing yourself to just do it. You know what I mean? Without even having to know the why. You know what I mean? In that scenario where we're running at the very end, one of the girls got like a cramp, side stitch. And I was like, okay, well, just, you can run through it, put your arms up, open your lungs, be wide, take deep breaths. I attended science class when I was in school. But I was running with my sister, who's an anatomy major, is a high school teacher. And she was like, she went on for like 10 minutes explaining like intercostals and what causes a side stitch and how you avoid it. And it was like, she had way more information. Yeah. I don't know that she is any less likely to have it happen, but she's more knowledgeable. But I didn't have any of the information she had, but I did know if that happens, you only really have a couple options. You stop, or you open up your lungs as wide as you can and you try and fight through, and it's going to hurt a little bit. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things. So having the knowledge doesn't do you any good if you don't act on it and you don't know yourself, you know, and that's the thing is it's hard what Ford says. Cause I feel the same way. Like I hate having to walk on to a site and say like, hey, everybody did everybody drink water today? Like, is that where we are? But if it helps one person who didn't think about it, and it can be from a really good spot, right? Like, I mean, you could have a guy who's just busting it, just working as hard as he can, doesn't get out of the trench, and that's rewarded in our industry. But if you're not caring for yourself, that's going to have long-term and potentially short-term impacts that will make you not as productive and not as healthy as a person. You know, so it's a catch-22 that really everybody has to manage for themselves. And you know, I don't think we'll ever get away from the point where we have to tell it now, you know, because communication has become more necessary.
I think this is where teamwork really comes in too, because if there's three guys and you can like rotate around and give people like, you know, okay, you've been in there for a while, and now you're going to, you know, like managing that is helpful to each other. Like if you really are trying to watch out for your brother or your sister there working with you, like you can do it in small pods versus like, you know, blasting it from a text message or us talking about it. Like, you know, just watching the people around you and you're like,
Sure.
All right, Johnny, like you're looking a little, go sit in the shade for 10 minutes. I'll do a little bit here. Like just trying to keep an eye on the people around you is really helpful because, you know, you're there. You can see, you know, he's not looking up and looking around, which is, you know, people, you know, things in our world, you got to look around you. If you're not looking up because you're, you know, a little sluggish, like that's a problem. So you need to really be able to look out for your teammates around you as you're doing stuff.
Yeah. I was sort of thinking that too. Like, a lot of what we're talking about, there are visible signs of that, you know, heat fatigue and heat stress and things like that. Yeah. If you see your teammates, you gotta say something like, you know, do yourself a favor, do them a favor, keep everybody safe.
Well, and you know, going all the way back to the conversation about the air conditioning making us not acclimate as well to the heat, especially because it is hard to go in and out. You feel the heat more and you feel the cold when you come in. Is I was thinking about it is one of the things when I joined the company, one of the first things that really struck me was Ford's how adamant he was that, like, you know, names don't go on equipment because I don't want someone to think their job is to sit in that piece of equipment. And we said about like when you're in air versus out of air, but this equipment is air conditioned, you know, so when you're sitting there in an air conditioned track hoe digging with somebody in a trench below you, like, maybe they're hot. Get out and help them. You know what I mean? Like, get out. You know what I mean? Or like, it's just, it's one thing to say the three of us sit in an office, you know, a fair amount of the time and it's air conditioned here and it is not air conditioned when they're working. There's a little bit of a distance between us, but where it is a far different thing to say that the air conditioned office is 3 foot from the person who's working and just busting it in the heat, you know. So that was something that really always struck me with Ford is that Ford was never sitting in his truck, and he'd be the first one out of the machine if they needed help.
Well, I'll speak from just experience, but I know that personally, if I was like loading trucks, I would use heat or air. But if I was working with people in a trench, all doors were open and all heat or air was off. 2 reasons. One, you can hear better if there's somebody talking to you.
Sure.
And 2 is that, like, yeah, I'm pulling sticks and they're doing something else, but like, you're not going to be that much different. Like, there's not going to be that, like, I'm up here in the air conditioning. How's it going down there? Like, that was just one of my mentalities of making sure that, like, you know, one for all for one type scenario. But it was like, if I was doing something in a ditch or like there was people around, everything, all the windows, all the slides were open, all the doors were open because, you know, yeah, I'm already getting a benefit. I'm sitting down versus shoveling, but I'm not going to take advantage of. And, you know, the other thing is here's our public service announcement. The air conditioners in these machines are designed for the amount of space that the cab has. They're not designed to air condition the world.
The entire site.
Yes.
Yeah. Use the doors open.
This is going back from a history story, but we had a guy and air conditioner's not working. So we sent out a technician. It's working fine. Calls again. air conditioner's not working. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to drive out there. I drive out. They have the doors open to the cab and the air conditioner on high, and they're saying it's not cool enough. It's not designed to do that. So like, it was more of a, like an understanding that like these air conditioners on these machines are made to handle like 20 square feet or whatever the scenario is. They're not a full earth blaster. So like, if you think that they're not quite cooling enough, probably because, you know, if you're working and you're working around people, you got to have a window open so you communicate or something. And that's, it's not going to do much. And then all it's going to do is just overwork the system. And then it might not work at all for you in the future. So you got to pay attention to those factors.
Well, you know what we didn't talk about at all is the equipment itself. You know, is the actual equipment. You think about this time of year, the good part is that it's not muddy anymore. You know, you start to have better soil conditions. It's more workable.
Now you have dust.
You have dust. And so not only are these machines trying to run, you know, efficiently like they always would, but now it's hot, which makes it harder on the machines. And it's really dusty, you know, and you sort of, the other day when we were out and we took your truck and Brian put his window down, partly to have a conversation and partly, I don't know what the other part of it was. Like he just wanted to like open the window, sort of like you said. And as soon as he did it, I was like, I didn't say anything, but I was like, oh boy. And rock truck or something goes by and I could just see it coming from behind us and just huge cloud of dust. And it looked like someone they had a blower, just blew it right into his truck. And I was like, yeah, that's why I hope the guys understand when I'm driving around on the site a lot of times and I have my windows up, it's specifically because I don't want to spend 5 hours cleaning my truck later that night because it's full of dust. But by the same token, that's why I usually park my truck and I try and walk around, is because it's not that I couldn't drive my truck to some of the places. It's that I don't want to put the windows down, but I want to be engaged. But the same thing with the equipment. You know, you're running that.
You got to check your filters.
Yeah, you got to check your filters. And if you're running the equipment and you're doing the right thing, windows are open, you're communicating, like that machine's going to be real dirty inside, you know? And so you got to turn that air on. It may not work at all because all the filters are clogged, you know, because of that problem. So each season has its own thing, you know, and, you know, right now it's going to be heat and dust, but I think in a lot of ways I like extremes. So I'll take heat and dust or I'll take snow and ice. But what I don't really like is the season some people like, those fall and spring, because then it is likely going to be bad conditions. It's going to be rainy and miserable. And it's, you know, in my mind, we can all disagree. But I take the extremes and I'll take the heat and the dust and the ice and the snow over the mud and the middle ground of those seasons. But you got to take care of yourself regardless of what season it is. Make sure you're in your best possible state.
Yeah. That's probably a good place to wrap it up. It's hot. Take care of yourselves. Watch out for each other and drink water. Thanks, folks. We hope you got something from this and we hope you come back for another episode.